Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Fine.
Good.
I've deployed a new technical innovation that was just recently in the news. I'm using our new Blogging Heads invisibility cloaking device. So you can't actually see me, although I'm here.
Well, your voice grew suddenly more subdued, Mickey, so I kind of have a theory as to what's making you invisible. Is it some sort of, piece of cloth?
No, it's much more technically sophisticated. As you can see, my chair is swiveling, but I'm not here. Or you can't see me. I am actually here. And you can hear me, but you can't see me. So it's amazing. None of the other video sites have anything like this cloaking device.
Well, Mickey, I'll tell you, I have no idea what you're doing, but I know it's going to bring me a lot of mirth as usual.
Yeah. Okay, well now
when I see it, because you are a non-stop party.
Okay, now I'll turn it off and come back.
Glad to have you back.
Hey.
That was tough going solo. You know,
yeah.
Mickey, I'm a little worried. Because, you had told me that you think coffee takes effect almost immediately, so you can drink your cup of coffee just 1 minute before the dialogue.
Yes.
And you'll still be alert. So I just had my coffee a couple minutes ago, and the drugs have not taken effect. And I'm worried that maybe you will outthink me on this particular episode, and I think that would be kind of disorienting for our viewers.
I doubt it because I got 3 hours sleep, so...
Okay.
I think we're equal.
So, caffeineless Bob versus sleepless Mickey.
And the invisibility device may have sort of effects on my brain. So
many things do.
Anyway, good to be back with you.
Yeah, really. It's been hard. I mean, and this is a real switch from Joel Achenbach.
Yeah, I can't possibly approach your incredible levels of pregame banter. I mean...
That's been a real email getter.
That was banter on banter.
So far, the Joel likers outnumber the Joel haters, but both are substantial contingents.
Yeah, barely. I love the banter. At least the first 20 minutes of it.
Well, if it was more than that, I don't think it would be banter.
The second 2 hours were a little long. Cool.
All right. We're rocking now, man.
Yeah.
What are we gonna talk about? Afghanistan?
Well, Afghanistan seems to be in the news.
Yeah.
There were these anti-American riots. I guess yesterday after a traffic accident, people chanting "Death to America," "Death to Karzai," and "Death to the dog washers."
The dog watchers?
Washers. I don't know quite what that means, but in the LA Times, that was one of the chants. That was favored locally is "Death to the dog washers."
Doesn't sound flattering.
I mean, my basic... It's not clear to me why this means Afghanistan is going down the tubes. And also it's not clear to me how anything we did, say, in Iraq, if we hadn't gone into Iraq, why that would make things better. Maybe you have a different opinion.
A little bit different. I mean, first of all, this thing kind of eerily reminds me of the Fallujah thing years ago when those 4, I guess they were American security contractors, were killed and dragged through the streets and whatever. Not in the sense that that's what happened here, but in the sense that this is an event that makes a lot of people go, whoa, there are a lot of people here who really don't like us. It's just a real attention getter.
Well, but there were also riots over the cartoons and riots over the Isikoff story about the Koran being flushed down the toilet.
Well, no, but I mean the people in Afghanistan specifically. I mean, this occupation may not be going so well after all, if occupation is what you want to call it. I mean, first of all, Peter Bergen in our dialogue of a couple of weeks ago said Afghanistan is going south, and he had been an optimist only a year and a half or so ago. So this is not actually the first evidence. I mean, there have been growing signs, growing causes for alarm, I think.
They're going...
Now, you may think I'm going to turn this into an occasion for Bush bashing.
Yes, I do.
You're right. You're 1 for 1 on the day, Mickey. I have 3 data points, or maybe just 2, that I would like to revisit.
Okay.
Okay. One is, before we invaded Afghanistan, shortly after 9/11, I went to a seminar at Penn where I was then teaching, and they had gotten together just kind of some faculty members who knew something about Afghanistan. One of them said, look, you can invade, but good luck holding that country together. It has never had a strong centralized government. It has these strong centrifugal or centripetal forces, depending on your physics. And, tribalism, ethnic issues. And this was just, another guy who knew something about Afghanistan. So it was common knowledge that the administration had a real challenge of governance after the war.
So you wouldn't have done Afghanistan either?
No, I would have done Afghanistan, but...
Well, so then you would have faced the problem.
Well, no, but then I would have said, we've got to do major, epic nation, not just rebuilding, but weaving this nation together in a way it's never been woven together before. And I mean, one thing I was thinking was, I would take the highways connecting the main cities and at all costs keep them secure, because you want to foster economic interaction among those cities, because if you can get the wealthy elites of a country to have a stake in the country's continued cohesion, then, you've got forces favoring cohesion. And right away you started getting these attacks on the highways, and it was like not all that safe. Another data point is, right before the Iraq War, Fareed Zakaria, I forget whether this was a column or him commenting on the radio or what, but he said, one thing that bodes ill for the Iraq War is that the administration has not taken the post-war occupation in Afghanistan seriously. They have not put the resources in. It was actually a pretty minimal troop presence. They have not put the resources in nation building. So this was a critique years ago that the administration was not taking the challenge of holding Afghanistan and holding the Taliban at bay seriously enough. Okay? Now, you asked, did Iraq make this worse? Oh, probably only marginally, because I don't think the administration was taking it seriously to begin with. But, yes, Iraq did drain some focus and some resources from Afghanistan, I think.
Well, first, it's not clear to me, are the highways not safe now? We did build the one big highway. I don't read constant news accounts of brigands on the highway threatening traffic. Second, when have we ever successfully rebuilt a nation as backwards as Afghanistan? I would suggest never, and I doubt that massive American resources would necessarily make a difference. It might just be wasted, lead to more corrupt elites, and obviously our footprint on the ground there is causing a lot of resentment. If we had a bigger footprint, it might just cause more resentment. The third thing is, the Taliban haven't necessarily been all that effective militarily. There's a blogger named Bill Raggio, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, who's actually there now. But he on a blog called Strategy Page points out that the Taliban have been taking a beating. They're desperate for taking, a sign of success would be if they took over some town even briefly and made a videotape and broadcast it to the world, and they haven't been able to do that because every time they pop up, we've been repelling them, or other people have been repelling them.
Yeah, well, his blog tends to interpret events in Afghanistan and Iraq in accordance with the storyline that we're doing well. And
well, correct, but
the fact is that in Iraq, demonstrably, I think things have been going downhill, notwithstanding those kinds of interpretations. It's a good, well-informed blog, and he studies these things, and I've corresponded with him, and I encourage people to go to it. But the people, Peter Bergen, who again, he was once an optimist, he's now a pessimist, and he's gone there repeatedly. And he was a pessimist before this last event.
Is he a pessimist, or does he think things are going downhill?
Well,
there's.
That's a pretty fine distinction between those two. I'll link to the video, and viewers can judge for themselves.
The one thing. Go ahead.
Well, the main point is, I'm not dreaming up this critique of the Bush administration, retrospectively in light of recent events. People were saying, including Fareed Zakaria...
Well, but I think they made some changes after the Fareed column. If I remember it, the conventional wisdom was Bush didn't take it seriously, but then finally he got it right. Maybe that was, whistling past the graveyard, but things did happen after Fareed Zakaria wrote that column that maybe were good.
And as for your saying, well, if we ever rebuilt a nation, well, it's never mattered like it matters now, and we didn't used to really try. During the Cold War, all we needed was client states, and as long as we had nominal rulership of them, as long as we had the government, and the government, using however draconian a force they needed to use, could keep the country together, we were happy. This is a totally different ballgame where popular discontent is itself an enemy of American national security. And I'm not sure we're up to the challenge of rebuilding nations, but if we're not, we're in more trouble because it's just a project that matters now.
The one thing we're clearly doing wrong is trying to prosecute the war on drugs at the same time. I mean, here they have a cash crop, they can sell it, they can make money, and we're making it our business to go around and burn these crops.
Same in South America. It's a big mistake, I think.
Absolutely insane. Chris Hitchens wrote a very good column. I know your friend Chris Hitchens, but he wrote a very good column about how insane this policy is, and even the people who want to increase our commitment to Afghanistan and increase the aid and increase the troops, like Tom Lantos said, of course, we have to eradicate the opium production too. And the left wing says, oh, it's terrible, the opium production is rising. Let the opium production rise. Let them make money. We want them to be prosperous. The cost in the West is that there'll be more junkies. So, I mean, it seems to me a sense of priority says Afghanistan is more important.
Somebody's got to sacrifice for the war on terrorism. Why not junkies?
Well put, Bob.
Yeah. No, but I do agree that, look, it's kind of, the drug problem in America is kind of America's failing, and we should not inflict it on the rest of the world the way we're doing, in particular in South America, which has led to a lot of anti-Americanism in South America.
Well, and are the farmers going to be on our side when we burn down the only crop that they have that can feed their families? I don't think so.
I'm betting against that, too.
But my basic point is that the World Bank has been trying to develop countries with massive aid for decades. When have they succeeded? It's not clear to me that it can be done.
Well, I'm not sure those are all failures, but it's hard. I mean, what I was thinking was don't only keep the roads open between cities, but systematically kind of foster economic interdependence and commerce and so on. But I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Well, I just don't think people should panic just because there's this one big riot.
They've been starting to panic for months, though. Knowledgeable people have been saying things are getting worse and worse.
Okay. I'm no expert.
Me either.
Okay. Let's move on.
Immigration?
Immigration, another thing ripped from the day's headlines. Last week there was this consensus that, the House better cave to the Republicans in the Senate and the Democrats in the Senate if they want a bill, and they better pass a comprehensive bill that includes not only enforcement but also some sort of legalization or a path to citizenship. I always thought that conventional wisdom was bogus, and I think this weekend, it lasted about one Memorial Day weekend. I think if you watched This Week with George Stephanopoulos yesterday, they all said, oh, no, that's ridiculous. The only way they're going to get a bill is if the Senate agrees to the House bill and just passes an enforcement-only bill. And there's all sorts of data points, as you would call it, coming in showing that the pro-citizenship, pro-legalization forces are on the run. There's a representative, Mr. Cannon, in Utah, who's about to get ousted by his own constituents because he's too pro-immigration. The right-wingers like John Fund, who are sort of semi-open borders type, pro-amnesty types, are clinging desperately to this compromise proposal by Mike Pence, which would have some sort of guest worker program but no path to citizenship. They're just all the signs are that this is slipping away from the administration, and if they think they're going to pull a McCain-Kennedy amnesty bill out of this, they're completely dreaming.
But do you think any bill is going to emerge? Do you think the Senate is going to come around to the House's way of thinking?
I think that if the Republicans have a brain, they will say, if we want to do something, everybody's for enforcement, so let's pass an enforcement bill, and there are various things they can say that would sort of take the anti-Latino sting out of it. They can say down the road we're going to consider, amnesty if this works. They can increase the quotas from Latin American countries. I mean, the unskilled quota from Mexico is ridiculously low. Let's increase it. That should make some people happy. And pass it, and then they have something to take to the voters. But politicians don't always do the smart thing, especially a president who seems to have entered office with like 3 or 4 idée fixes, or idée fixes, or however you pronounce them, and is systematically screwing them up one by one. And one of his ideas is he wants to have this legalization that's going to make generations of Latinos go Republican.
Well, I'm not really sure that what you're saying the smart thing to do is the smart thing to do. First of all, I don't think you would sell that to Latinos very easily as being not anti-Latino, even if you threw a few token things in around the fringes. I wouldn't favor it myself.
Why wouldn't you favor it?
Not that I'm a barometer of anything. And also...
I thought you've been arguing for weeks that if we fixed the borders, we could have a legalization.
No,
So why don't you want to fix the borders?
Yeah, if we fix the borders and simultaneously, yeah, I'm in favor of doing both simultaneously, yes.
Why does it have to be simultaneous? It makes no sense to do it simultaneously.
Because for one thing, I just don't like the nativist aura it gives off if all you do is border security.
But why is it nativist? You're saying...
Well, first of all, the political forces behind it are largely nativist.
If you raise the quotas at the same time, why is that nativist?
Well, if you do enough of that kind of stuff, you would please me. But one thing I'd want you to do is provide some kind of path to citizenship.
I mean, you can't tar. We wouldn't have welfare reform if you said, well, I don't want to be part of any group that has Neanderthals and racists in it. There were a whole bunch of Neanderthals and racists behind welfare reform. So what? Welfare reform was still the right thing to do.
Well, I wouldn't have been behind welfare reform if it didn't have at least some things on the other side in terms of, training and so on. It still didn't have as much of that as it would have liked, and that's comparable to my position here. I mean, this has always been a difference between us, Mickey. You're saying border security now, and then we'll see, and I'm saying no. I'll take border security per se, that is to say security at the border, not hunting down people who are already here, along with a package that includes things like path to eventual citizenship. The Bush position. I've never said anything else, Mickey.
Okay, the problem is, fair enough, the problem is that the path to citizenship acts as a magnet attracting more people, while at the same time you're trying to put up your border security.
Yeah, and there might be a little leakage.
It's logically flawed. It's not a question of, they're two good things and let's do them both.
I actually think if you put your mind to it, you can start clamping down on the border pretty quickly. And for that matter, if you wanted to go ahead and pass the legislation now that put the citizenship stuff in effect, 18 months from now or something, fine. But
that starts a stampede to the border. That tells everybody in Latin America, you have 18 months to get across the line before it gets shut down. That leads to the Oklahoma land rush.
No. I'm not talking about... Well, anyway, if that would be the effect, I totally retract what I'm saying, but I don't think I'm saying what you think I'm saying. Anyway, do you really think... I think nothing will pass. That was what David Corn predicted on Blogging Heads TV months ago. Doesn't it still look to you like the most likely thing?
If the House passes an enforcement-only bill or an enforcement... a defamed enforcement-only bill where you don't make it a felony and you maybe raise the quotas and you have some sort of guest worker program that lets more new people into the country and sends it to the Senate, is the Senate not going to pass that? The standard, Beltway wisdom is no, the Democrats will filibuster it. I think that's bogus. I think the Democrats will cave the way they caved on the filibuster of Alito and Roberts. Hillary Clinton's not going to filibuster a bill that says we want to tighten the borders. She'd be insane to do that.
I'm not sure that the Republicans are going to be as enthusiastic about a thing that's essentially border security only as you think. And it isn't just their desire to court the Latino vote. The business constituency, which is helping to drive their position now, will not be enthusiastic unless you raise those quotas big time.
Yeah, but they want to get reelected, and they don't want to suffer the fate of Mr. Cannon in Utah and get booted out of office. So I think they will go along. It's a little like the Dubai Ports deal. If Bush was smart, he would figure out what are the sweeteners I can add to an enforcement bill that will detoxify it, that will make it not nativist, that will, at least have Latinos be neutral. And he's not going to do that. He's a step behind, and the result is going to be another Dubai-like debacle, I think.
Well, we'll see. I will say, if you get no legislation at all, then the people who will have won in terms of substance will be, by and large, the people who supported the Senate bill, because a lot of them really were happy with the status quo. They just felt that they needed to appease the growing nativist or otherwise anti-immigrant sentiment, and so they came up with this bill that played both sides of the fence.
I think it's more that the president thought he needed to appease the Latino sentiment. I mean, why? He's the one who started this whole thing. Now, this didn't have to be on the front burner. He's the one who put it there. And he put it there because he has another grandiose idea that he's going to be like Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves and win the Latino vote for generations. If he hadn't done nothing, it wouldn't have been on the agenda. If he hadn't done anything, I claim.
Okay. Well, I defer to you on matters of domestic political analysis. I've learned from you that the disingenuous concession is very effective rhetorically. People like you if you say, I defer to you. They like that. So, Mickey, I defer to you.
Do I do that?
You do it. Oh, you do it all the time. It's like I want to kill you.
But now you've given the game away.
You were doing it with Jackie Shire in an extremely disingenuous way. Oh, but I defer to you on that. I defer to you.
It's like I meant it at the moment I said it.
I know. I defer to you on the question of what you meant.
It looked disingenuous at the time.
I defer to you.
But this segues into our next topic, which
deference.
Is...
No, it's not deference. What is it?
You've made the mistake of being honest about your disingenuousness, so everybody sees through you now.
I always get that wrong.
It's a cheap ploy.
Darn, as Napoleon Dynamite says.
The McCain, who is made a huge effort to achieve some sort of a comprehensive deal with both amnesty and enforcement. And it was about to get clobbered on it, I think, and also in a way that will really piss off the Republican base against him, may have done himself damage in terms of getting the Republican nomination. But there's a new route has been opened up for him. There's always been talk about the so-called party in a laptop, which...
First of all, you talk about your subtle segues, Mickey. That was good.
Was it?
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.
From immigration to party in a laptop. Just the viewers don't even know it happened. Go ahead. Sorry.
It was good until you interrupted me. Anyway, when Howard Dean came to the fore, people started to realize, hey, what is it that political parties do that can't spontaneously arrive on the web? The web can raise money. The web can raise volunteers. The web can, in a matter of weeks, mobilize a bunch of lawyers to go to all 50 states and petition to get a third party on the ballot. And Ron Brownstein of the LA Times was one of the first to pick up on this and pointed out that this opens the way for a web-driven third party. You don't have to have the money in advance. You can raise the money, in a couple of weeks whenever you need it. And he also pointed out that because both parties were now playing to their base, that's Bush's strategy, and the Democrats having been sort of taken over by Move On, it opens up a route up the center for a third party. And it opens up a route up the center for an internet-driven third party. And now a group has actually stepped to the fore, Unity08.com. John Alter wrote a very good article about them this week in Newsweek, to try to actually start an internet-driven third party. And it's a little like that show American Candidate, where they tried to imitate American Idol and sort of have a contest to see who would run for president. The show was a disaster, but this is sort of an attempt to actually do it in real, really for real. Have some sort of spontaneous web movement that nominates a third-party candidate and gets them on the ballot. And it seems to me there's a shot at winning, especially if that person is John McCain, who's now made himself toxic to the Republican Party. How about that for theory?
I like it. I like parties in a laptop. Now, the people running this thing are what? Hamilton Jordan and
Hamilton Jordan, Jerry Rafshoon, who was Carter's
so a
image
bunch
people.
of Carter exiles.
Well, except Jordan
alums.
Jordan since then has run Ross Perot's campaign, so he has some experience.
So he knows a thing or two about ultimately doomed third-party candidacies. Well, I read John's piece, and I had a couple of questions. One is, why are these people... They clearly want a centrist candidate to emerge.
Right.
It's not clear to me that if they set this thing in motion, how they're so confident that it will be a centrist candidate who will emerge. After all, the essence of this, it seems to me, is they don't have control of it, right? I mean, all they're going to do is set up a procedure by which people can go online and vote.
That's a very good question, how much control they have. It's also not clear that, if this is so easy, why should there be only one?
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, people who feel energized to do things like go online and vote in these special things, I think tend to be people at the left and right extreme, right? Aren't they the activists? I mean, centrists...
Well, but there is a space in the center, and there are a lot of angry people who feel, betrayed by the partisanship on both sides.
Yeah, but Perot wasn't the center in the sense of kind of the average of all positions. He was just an odd combination of kind of nationalism and some other things.
Well, that's right, and you'd have to avoid. There's no groundswell of angry moderation, really. I think you need.
Right. So I'm not sure these guys would get what they're bargaining for. The other interesting thing is that if a third-party candidate does emerge, I mean, the scenario I kind of got from the altar piece was, well, the candidate probably wouldn't win the first time this is tried, but would be a force. Well, yeah, but if the candidate stays in the race until the very end, he or she is a force against the mainstream candidate that he or she favors, right? In the sense that, Ralph Nader takes votes away from the left, and so...
But who would McCain take votes away from? It's not clear to me.
I'm just dealing at an abstract theoretical level. I just have my, Anthony Downs graph in mind. And I'm just saying that in principle, if you really want to have influence, if you're a third-party candidate who can't win, the thing to do is withdraw at the last minute and throw your support to your favorite candidate rather than stealing support.
Right. Well, there's always that option, and I never understand why it's not exercised more.
Well, and not only that, I would say it offers the hope for actually kind of radical and interesting things. I mean, in particular, the candidate could take... there are issues in both domestic and foreign policy where there's kind of consensus among, well, not consensus, but a lot of policy thinkers agree on what the smart thing to do would be, but politics prevent you from doing it. I mean, a good example of an unaddressed problem is Social Security, the famous third rail, but there are others. And it seems like a really powerful third-party candidate who was bargaining with the other two candidates and promising to throw support to one or the other might be able to get one of the main party candidates to actually adopt a meaningful position.
Right. It'd be more like a parliamentary system where in order to join the coalition they have to appoint you Secretary of Treasury and enact your Social Security program.
Right. But you have to basically go into it kind of willing to drop out at the last minute and not like Ralph Nader letting your ego get in the way.
Well, it depends what the polls show. I mean, the polls might show the third-party candidate winning. I mean, if you have Hillary Clinton on one side and George Allen on the other side and McCain in the middle, I don't see why McCain doesn't outpoll them.
That could happen too.
A couple of problems. If you go to this website, it's a little too much Concord Coalition. It's sort of like David Broder trying to pretend he's Howard Beale, trying to be populist, and it has a little bit of a sort of fake populist quality, like, gee, we have to tell these people, we have to get them riled up, but we're not especially riled ourselves. So it's a little too sort of moderate an establishment, although it could get taken over. And the second thing is, a point Brownstein makes, is in order to win in our system, it's not enough to get 50% of the vote, you have to actually win states. So it's entirely possible that, a centrist would lose to the right-winger in the red states, lose to the left-winger in the blue states, wind up with no electoral votes, but actually win the popular vote because you finish second everywhere. That's an impediment in the system. So it's a little more complicated than I've made it out to be. If it's not McCain, God, it's got to be somebody pretty charismatic.
Well, speaking of that, Mickey, I just want to take this opportunity to again say that I am not now a candidate. I have no intention of becoming a candidate.
Well, but the night is young, Bob. You have a year to decide. That's the whole beauty of...
Well, a person never says never, Mickey.
That's the whole beauty of the web. It's like flying on JetBlue. You don't have to make reservations in advance. You can decide the day before.
Well...
So, I'm not counting you out.
Well, say what you will, think what you will, Mickey. And I know there's been a lot of talk about this in the blogosphere.
Well, this is a sort of tryout. We're seeing how you respond to the challenges of our time, whether you're ready to assume the mantle of office.
Over the last 6 months, I've tried to demonstrate the kind of equanimity and imperturbability that you would like in a chief executive.
You had a few lapses, though.
A few.
Yeah, only a few. But let's see how you do in a foreign policy area. Another foreign policy area. Let's segue to Iran, which is the next topic on our agenda.
It is.
And I don't know if there's been all that much new in Iran. I mean, there's a couple of New York Times stories. One, that their nuclear program has sort of slowed.
Right.
They're not centrifuging as much as people had expected.
And it's not clear whether that's because they're finding it harder than they expected, which a lot of people think, or whether it's some sort of diplomatic overture, which is the spin that was put on it in the Times piece on it.
Or if they're doing it covertly. That's the far right-wing spin.
Right, because the inspectors who are reporting, I guess, are one of the sources of information that there's been a slowdown, are not allowed to go anywhere they want. Right. Speaking of which, it seems to me, I mean, one objection to intrusive arms control is, well, Americans would never accept the infringement on their own sovereignty. It seems to me, if you said right now, look, one of the problems with the non-proliferation treaty is inspectors aren't allowed to go anywhere they want. Now, would you, in exchange for letting the inspectors do that in Iran right now, would you give them the right to do that here in America, where you know we have nothing to hide? I'm not convinced that most Americans wouldn't say yes. But that's a mere tangent.
But that's the intrusive arms control inspection is always the Bob Wright solution.
A little bit of a hobby horse.
And I favor that. But you had some. You wanted to weigh in on this debate I had with Jackie Shire a couple.
I do. I mean, first I should say there's this other New York Times piece. Iran chief eclipses power of clerics. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is trying to consolidate power in the office of the presidency in a way never before seen in 27-year history of the Islamic Republic, etc. I mean, this is an important story to the extent that it's true or indicative of trends.
It wasn't wildly convincing.
It sure wasn't, man.
The evidence was he succeeded in evicting his predecessor from his offices.
Exactly.
That's really impressive.
There's a reason they call them predecessors.
And he had lobbied to have women be able to attend soccer matches, but he was overruled.
Right. So, I mean, it's amazing. This was the lead piece. And first of all, let me say, the reason this matters is because there's been all this talk about, is he really crazy? Is Ahmadinejad really crazy? If he is, then we have to worry about the possibility of him having a nuclear bomb. My line has been, it doesn't matter. In Iran, the president doesn't have actual power. He doesn't control the armed forces. It's not like here. There's somebody over him. So this piece comes out and is a little alarming at first. But then, okay, so the lead paragraph says, he's trying to consolidate power, apparently with the tacit approval of Iran's supreme leader, according to government officials and political analysts. Then you get down and you say, okay, well, what are the signs of this? And you see a little later that, he has challenged high-ranking clerics on the treatment of women. But you're right. The one clear example they give of him doing that, he gets his wings clipped by Iran's supreme leader, who swats him down and says, no, we're not doing this.
It's not necessarily a non-benign story. I mean, the first spin is, well, this guy who's a madman is getting more power, so we have to worry more. But the second spin is, he's saying these horrible things about the Holocaust and Israel in order to buy himself credibility with the right wing so he can modernize internally.
Well, there's another interpretation.
That's the positive spin on it. Yeah.
There's another interpretation, which is that he is saying these things to attract the masses, not just in Iran, but also in the Arab street. This is something that Matt Iglesias pointed out early on in his blog, that, remember, there are no Arab leaders who want this guy to have the bomb.
Right.
But if he starts mouthing all of this anti-Israel stuff, he's going to get some support on the streets in these Arabian countries and make it harder for those leaders to shut down his nuclear aspirations.
Although that will really terrify those leaders if he starts to get support on the street.
Exactly. And I think that may well be what he's trying to do. But in any event, I mean, all of the what they're reporting here, which is that he probably is gaining some degree of power relative to the traditional power structure, in Iran is interpretable, I think, as a result of the success he's having gathering popular support within Iran. And naturally, the people who would normally swat him down will tread a little more lightly than they would if, in fact, he's succeeding in that. That doesn't mean they like the idea of him amassing power. And in fact, if you're looking for substantiation of the claim that he's apparently doing it with the tacit approval of Iran's supreme leader, it's a sentence where they say, but many of those watching in near disbelief at the speed and aggression with which the president is seeking to accumulate power assume that he is operating with the full support of Ayatollah Khamenei. So that's total guesswork. And then again, it turns out that the Ayatollah did swat him down on the one clear-cut case of him challenging the clerics. So it's a very thinly sourced story.
I agree. I want to bring up one idea which I had, which is, there is this Chris Hitchens kill them with kindness approach, which is we basically embrace Iran. We meet with them. We have a sort of China opening with them. We try to trade with them, get them addicted to prosperity and capitalism. I've never understood why that isn't the best way to go, as opposed to trying to sanction them. And then, if it doesn't work, and they're about to get the bomb, and they're still, irrational warmongers, then we always have the option of attacking them and taking out the facilities. So I don't understand why this high-low strategy of being nice and holding the military option in reserve isn't the way to go.
Well, not only that, you could offer full engagement and recognition as a carrot in exchange for their doing any number of things on the nuclear front. And one of them that was brought up in this dialogue with Afshin Malavi that Eric Umansky did right here on Blogging Heads TV was Afshin asserted that actually it's possible to let them reprocess uranium, and if you have sufficiently vigilant monitoring, you can be sure that it's not turning into weapons-grade material or not being diverted for those purposes or something. If that's possible, that would allow them to save face. But in any event, in some kind of carrots-type deal, but in any event, the Bush administration is essentially averse to the use of carrots. This is just a theme that pervades their foreign policy. But it's all sticks.
You also wanted to jump in on this idea. I claim that mutually assured destruction won't work against Iran because if they smuggle a bomb into the United States and it goes off, there is no guarantee that we are going to retaliate against them the way we would have retaliated against Russia, for example. Unless you see a missile going up and coming down, the provenance of a sort of terrorist-style nuclear explosion is sufficiently vague that MAD just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the background of this is, people have long described a terrorist nuclear attack as lacking a return address and therefore not being deterrable. It turns out, this emerged in your dialogue with Jackie Shire, that actually there are chemical signatures so that you can be, I don't know how confident, whether it's 100% or 99 or what, but that you can pretty much determine where the stuff came from, even after somebody uses it to blow up Manhattan. And if that's the case, then in principle, you could hold the country of origin responsible.
Well, what if...
And that's the context of this whole...
What if they say, the bomb was stolen from us? Sure, it's one of our bombs. We didn't want to do this. It just happens to have gone off in New York City. Are we really going to incinerate Tehran for that? I don't think so.
Well, I'd say two things. One is, if you think we wouldn't, I would invite you to reflect on the last 4 years of American history, or 5 years or so. I mean, if a nuke goes off in America, you're going to see a shift in American psychology like you've never witnessed. And even the shift in psychology after 9/11 was pretty dramatic. We didn't just invade one country, the country that was responsible. Okay, first of all, only 3,000 Americans died. It wasn't enough to invade one country. We invaded a second country, and the reason it was so politically easy to invade them, if you'll recall, is that most Americans were convinced that they had something to do with 9/11 when there was, in fact, no evidence that was the case. Okay, so Mickey, that was 0%, zero evidence that they were implicated, and there was enough political support to invade them.
You're getting sidetracked. We don't have to get into that.
No,
I buy your point about a shift in psychology. What's your second point?
Well, we may not need one if you buy it sufficiently enough, but I will give you a second point. So
Okay.
you agree then that actually it is quite thinkable that if we were only 99% sure that Iran gave the terrorists the weapons or Iran did it itself, yeah, we might well nuke Tehran. You now are more...
I think that's a powerful argument.
Okay. The other
think...
point is, deterrence is always probabilistic. The kind of deterrence we had with the Soviet Union, which worked successfully for decades, was not 100% sure. You couldn't be sure that we would survive, that our decision-making infrastructure would survive their nuclear attack and blah, 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 blah. It was possible for them to imagine a scenario according to which they'd be able to get off a successful nuclear attack without retaliation. So it's never a 100% thing. The question is how persuasive... how much can you reduce the chances of a nuclear attack by threatening retaliation? So first of all, I would say make it a doctrine. Say publicly, if a nuke goes off in America and it's got an Iranian signature, we hold Iran responsible for what happens to its nuclear material.
What if there's a shadowy, stateless third-party conspiracy that says, oh no, it wasn't Iran, it was us. It was Al Qaeda, and they claim we stole this bomb from Iran, and it's now gone off in New York.
Well, first of all, you're kind of in a way getting ahead of... You're asking what would actually happen if this actually happened. I mean, for purposes of deterrence, what matters is what are people thinking will happen. Okay?
Right, but if they think the probability is 50%, it's a lot less effective than if they think it's 90%.
Of course. If they do that thought experiment, that may matter if the Iranians do it.
Right, well...
But it's a pretty obscure thought experiment. And what I'm saying is if we say it's a matter of American policy, we don't care what the extenuating circumstances are. If the chemical signature says Iran, an Iranian city goes up in flames, all of Iran's political leaders are killed. If we announce that publicly, I think that would be enough of a disincentive for them to either share nukes or sneak one in themselves. And in any event, I think you'd have to agree the possibility of doing that at least reduces the chances that they would use nukes against us. And when you're in the decision-making process we're in now, like, well, should we invade Iran over this? I mean, then you've got to plug in all these variables, like, well, how likely is it that they would use the nuclear weapon against us? And if this would at least appreciably reduce those chances, then it's worth thinking about and trying to attach a number to it. Again, it's not 100%. Deterrence never is.
But at some point, the capacity of mutually assured destruction to deter degrades so radically that the option of taking out their nukes right now with a military strike becomes more appealing. And I have a feeling that you will do anything to avoid that conclusion.
Well, that's an interesting theory, and maybe you come up with some examples of things I would do. But I think I just got you to agree that actually the existence of a nuclear signature on these nuclear weapons means that they are at least more deterrable than we thought they were before we realized they had a chemical signature.
They're a lot less deterrable than a missile where you can see, oh, this missile came from a silo in
Moscow. I think they are less deterrable than that.
So it's a question of where in this spectrum
but I think,
it falls.
I think, but it just matters whether you're saying, well, if they get a bomb, it matters whether you think that the chances of it winding up nuking us or somebody else are, kind of 1 in 50 or 1 in 5,000. That's a big that difference matters when you're deciding whether to go to war.
Right. What if they say this shadowy organization says New York has just gone up, and if you retaliate in America, we have bombs planted in 5 other cities that will go up. Go off if you retaliate. As long as we're dreaming up scenarios.
Yeah. Well, that would be... then we'd be... Well, of course, by then I may be president.
Yeah, so that's very likely. So somehow I...
For viewers who went straight to this topic, I should say that's a joking reference to something that was brought up in another topic.
Bob launched his campaign for president in a previous topic.
No. I denied that I'm a candidate. And I encourage you to repeat that I'm not as often as possible on as many media as possible.
If you were a candidate, that's exactly what you would say. Anyway, what's the answer to this doomsday scenario?
Seems like then we're screwed. I don't know, but I mean, the chances, if that's doable, if that's plausibly doable, that they could sneak these nukes in footlockers into 6 cities, then that will be such a serious lapse in security that will be in, I mean...
Jackie said they're bigger than footlockers. They're more like cargo containers or big trucks.
Well, she said they're bigger than suitcases. I don't know.
She said
may
a
be right.
truck.
Maybe they're bigger than footlockers. I hope
She
so.
said a truck.
But you can, again, you can do these scenarios, but... of course, the more complicated the planning and logistics that it takes them to orchestrate these elaborate things, probably the more likely we are to be able to figure out for sure who did it at the end. But
it all makes the bombing this facility where all the inspectors are seem more appealing than it otherwise would.
To you, it does.
Well, more appealing. I'm not saying we should do it, but every time I read like this Paul Starobin article in National Journal about how Iran can be deterred. I draw exactly the opposite conclusion. It actually undermines my confidence.
Well, what's your logic? You haven't said anything so far that I've heard that lead me to believe that.
They're not as rational as the Soviets, and a bomb is not as traceable to them. The return address is not as sure as it would be with the Soviets.
Given the fact that the president, who is saying all this wacky stuff, probably for tactical purposes and not because he's wacky, but anyway saying them, given the fact that he has no control over the military forces of Iran, given the fact that it's not him who will decide, what is your basis for saying Iranians are less rational than Soviets?
Well, for one thing, we knew what the lines of communication were with the Soviets, and here we don't know who's going to has their finger on the button.
No, we do. It's the Ayatollah who's above the president.
Well, we think that.
We know that. He's in charge. He just swatted this guy down on a minor issue. He does it all the time.
And he's rational even though he's letting this madman run around.
I'm asking you, what's the basis for your assertion that he is less rational than a Soviet leader?
What is the basis for that? He's letting this madman run around saying that he's the hidden imam.
Mickey, it may be that his political position forces him to let that guy run around just the way Eisenhower's position forced him to let Joseph McCarthy diss some of Eisenhower's best friends, even though it drove him crazy.
Right, or it may be that he's irrational. It raises doubts. Those are two options.
No, there is no reason to resort to the explanation that the Ayatollah is irrational. There's not the slightest bit of evidence.
Okay, well that's... I'm glad you have so much faith in him.
I'm just saying I don't go around deciding who's rational and who's not on the basis of what country they're from or what religion they're from or anything else.
No,
and
I wasn't saying that.
as to what your basis is for saying this guy's irrational. And Mickey, remember, irrational in the sense of wanting to die himself. That's what we're talking about with deterrence.
I'm not judging him on the basis of his race or religion. I'm judging him on the basis of his statements, which seem to reflect a neutrality towards martyrdom. That is not something you want to have a stable, mutually assured destruction regime.
The Ayatollahs? The Ayatollah said?
No, the prime minister, but that is the president. But
the president is not in charge. That's my point. He's not in charge, Mickey.
But everybody's assuming that the man who you think is in charge is letting him run around and do these things, and I'm saying that at least raises some doubts. He's more powerful than Joe McCarthy was under Eisenhower. Okay?
Well, first of all, it's not clear that he hasn't had his wrist slapped on these specific issues.
So you're interpreting the New York Times account that he's seizing power exactly 180 degrees opposite, that it really showed he had no power.
No, I'm not saying that. I think he is amassing power enough so that it's harder for the Ayatollah to publicly reprimand him. I think that is the case. That is a political matter. That's my explanation for why there hasn't been much in the way of public reprimand. But I have seen no evidence, certainly not this New York Times article, that suddenly the president's going to be in charge of the armed forces. And if he's not, then his rationality is not even the question. If you're going to argue that it's the Ayatollah who's crazy, you've got to have some evidence.
There's more of a worry with this madman running around, even if he has less power than there would be if he wasn't running around. And I think that distinguishes the case from the Soviets. That's all I'm saying. We're all talking probabilities here.
A guy who doesn't control the military is a guy who doesn't control the military.
I mean, you were worried about him a couple of months ago. You replayed the video of him claiming to be surrounded by an aura of light at the United Nations.
Yeah, I did, and that's before I had taken into account something that was subsequently widely pointed out to me and others. In Iran, the president is a figurehead.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, defy the front page of the New York Times. See if I care. Let's move on. I actually rang the bell.
By the way, my coffee's kicking in.
Oh, good. I was worried about that. I could tell the decibel level was rising.
But that's consistent with my theory that it actually takes about half an hour.
Yeah. You wanted to give me grief over my ill-considered statements on abortion in
Yeah, what was it you said to Jackie Shire? I mean,
yes.
Feminists can't have it both ways. If they want men to, share the child-rearing duties, then men should have an equal say in whether they get an abortion?
That's one way to put it. I would say that there's a tension between asserting absolute control over the decision of whether to carry a child to term, and then saying once the child is born that men have an absolute moral obligation to equally share child rearing. It seems to me if men have the burdens, they should have some of the rights too.
I agree that if they have that in general, people should have rights to the extent that they have burdens. But I would say this is a case where the feminist position could benefit from Darwinian theory.
Okay.
There are more cases like that than some feminists realize, by the way.
That's what we go to you for.
Thank you.
Explain.
Well, one tool of evolutionary psychology is this notion of this theory of parental investment, where you look in any species, you look at how much the two different sexes invest, so to speak, in the offspring.
Right.
Now, in many species, it's virtually all female investment. Okay, the male is producing like millions of sperm, a day or whatever, and he tosses one off and then leaves, and the woman has a few precious eggs that she generates every month, and now that one is fertilized, she spends the next however long in gestation, and then in some species she goes on to rear the offspring in the early years while the male is off doing nothing. Now, humans are a species of so-called high male parental investment, which is just a way of saying that typically males do form some bond with the mother and stick around and contribute at least something to the offspring. They invest in the offspring. They help teach the offspring, help provide for the offspring. So it's high male parental investment relative to a lot of other species. It's still not high relative to the female's investment. And in fact, if you average it out, I would say females are still investing more in a child than a male. I mean, for one thing, having children lowers a woman's life expectancy. Such are the physical demands of pregnancy and then devoting yourself to kids. Whereas for males, settling down and having kids actually raises their life expectancy. They're actually getting something out of it. Secondly, if you look at the investment at the point where the decision about abortion is being made, the situation you have is all of the investment is coming from the female pretty much. And then the male is saying, in some cases at least, well, I really plan to stick around and invest in a really meaningful way once the kid is born, okay? But the overwhelming amount of investment during pregnancy is coming from the woman. Well, if you analogize it to a financial investment, right, if you've got a situation where at some point early on in the project there's one person who's provided 95% of the financing, they're the ones who decide whether to pull the plug on the investment, right? I mean, I don't want to be too kind of cold and calloused about this particular, about the decision to abort a child or a fetus or whatever, which is very morally serious. And I'm not even getting into that because the whole premise of this discussion is that there will be at least some abortions. Okay.
I'm not. At first, I'm not sure you're right in terms of financing. If somebody's providing 95% of the financing this month, but in a year somebody else is going to take over half of it. It's a matter of negotiation who gets to say on whether the investment goes ahead or not. It seems to me. I don't know what business practice is.
Well, that's in cases where where they have made a commitment that is somehow ironclad, such that they'll either, if they fail to deliver in the future, when they claim they're going to start investing, they'll be like thrown in jail or debtor's prison. Sure, if you have 100% confidence that they're going to chip in, but in real life, first of all, in many of these cases, the women are not married, so they certainly don't have that kind of confidence in the real world, even married women do not have the confidence that the man. Just look at the statistics, Mickey.
I don't think your argument has dissuaded me. I mean, you say there is high male parental investment. Why doesn't this high male parental investment entitle the male to at least some say in the decision whether to carry the baby to term? Right now, the official feminist position is the woman has 100% say, that even statutes that require notifying the male are unconstitutional.
Well, I'm not
me,
talking so much about notification. I'm saying the woman is entitled to at least 51% of the say, which in effect is 100%. You know, she's got a majority of the vote. She deserves it at that point.
Well, I'll go along with that. I was just arguing for notification and saying that there was a discord between the righteous 100% our bodies ourselves ideology of some feminists and then turning around and saying, okay, males, it's now your time to invest. I agree that it's certainly at least 51% in the female's control, but notification, I don't see what's the problem with that.
Well, notification, I have not even thought out a strong position on, but I just think abortion should be ultimately, when there's disagreement, the woman's decision.
Well, plus, isn't your attitude toward evolution that we shouldn't confuse is and ought? We're always imposing an external morality on the way of nature, so we could decide, well, who cares if males invest a lot, or who cares if they don't invest a lot? Is their moral obligation to do half the work?
I am against confusing is and ought. Yeah, for the purpose of this analysis, what matters is there is no guarantee that they will invest. And again, high male parental investment is just relative to males in other species. That's what the term means.
Yeah.
But there's one other Darwin to the rescue of feminist point that's relevant to your discussion with Jackie, which is on the issue of women, rearing, stay-at-home moms versus whether moms have an obligation to be stay-at-home moms, which was the origin of this discussion, I think. What was it? Do you remember the name of that woman? Caitlin Flanagan?
Caitlin Flanagan, yes.
Who is preaching to women that they should all be stay-at-home moms, and she, by virtue of her wealth, doesn't, has an easier time doing that than many.
Right.
And has an easier time reconciling her work with staying at home. The point is just that if you look at the closest thing we have to an example of the environment that women and men were kind of designed for by natural selection, it's a hunter-gatherer environment. And they make it very easy for a woman to reconcile taking care of kids and having a vocational and social life. They gather, and there are provisions for like having the kids along when they're out there gathering. And they have other women that they socialize with. And in the modern world, a lot of stay-at-home moms find themselves kind of isolated and depressed. And on the other hand, if they go to work, it's very hard to reconcile that with taking care of their kids. So modern society makes it hard for mothers to kind of live the life they were, quote, designed to live, designed by natural selection, the kind that's most natural for them. Whereas men are, I would say, are on balance living closer to what is natural for men. So women have a legitimate right.
Good point. I defer to your expertise again, and I mean it sincerely this time.
As you so often do. Have we been through everything?
We've been through everything, and we're almost an hour. But you wanted to I don't know. You were gonna
disrobe on camera?
You were gonna disrobe on camera and bring us a whole new audience.
Well, it is Sweeps Week, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that'll do it.
Yeah.
I know you've been working out to try to.
Actually, I am kind of sweating because it's so hot in here. But I wanted to just like unveil the Blogging Heads T-shirt. This one says "Saving the World One Dialogue at a Time." They're available. People can buy them. If you look to the just below and to the right of the TV screen, there's a link that leads you. And this is one of many. And Mickey, I think what's leading in terms of orders right now is Deploy the Moose.
I should hope so.
Well, and I think those people are basically your people, the far right fringe.
Well, they have more money, so they're better able to go and afford.
That explains it. In fact, I verified that the ones that say "Saving the World One Dialogue at a Time" were purchased with food stamps.
Well, I'm going to purchase them as soon as my credit limit's restored after my financially disastrous trip back east. So.
Yeah. It was good seeing you.
It was good seeing you. I may be sporting one of those next time.
Well, you should. It's the least you can do. And I think I know which slogan you're going to choose.
But unlike you, I think my slogan is only available on a beer stein. I don't want a beer stein.
No, there's a shirt.
Okay.
And there's also "We Retort, You Decide," but at last check, that was in a distant third place in terms of orders.
Cool. Well, I'm going to deploy the high-tech cloaking device again, I think.
I'm really curious to see this, Mickey.
Well,
I think that's what's going to make this thing a summer blockbuster. The
Well,
special effects is what does it.
yeah, well, you'll see it. It's pretty damn impressive. It's the people who won't have the faintest idea how we do it.
There's definitely some kind of audio change that happens when you do it, whatever it is, Mickey.
Well, that's because I accidentally covered up my microphone. But anyway, goodbye, Bob.
I couldn't have said it better. See you around.
Okay, see ya. Bye.